My husband's nephew shamed and slandered me during a family event after we paid his tuition, so I taught that spoiled brat a lesson he'll never forget. I'm 39, female, and have been married to Jake, 42, male, for over 15 years. For the most part, our marriage has been great. We don't have many issues, no huge fights or anything, except for one significant challenge that hit us a few years ago: infertility. I never really talked about it much, but we both desperately wanted kids. We tried everything: doctors, treatments, the whole deal, but nothing worked out for us. Adoption was something we considered, but it's a huge process where we live. You'd think it'd be easier to help a kid in need, right? But it's not. Plus, with both Jake and me working full-time, it felt impossible to give a child the attention they deserve. We didn't want to be those parents who adopt and then don't have time for the child. So we decided to put that plan on hold. Around that time, we had an idea. Since we couldn't have kids of our own, we figured we'd help out family instead. Jake's sister, Karen, 44, female, was really struggling. She's a single mom with 3 kids, and her ex-husband, Frank, was a real piece of work, a total deadbeat alcoholic who barely paid child support. Karen was doing her best, working 2 jobs just to get by, but it was clear she was drowning. Her kids, Lily, 23, female, Max, 20, male, and Lucas, 17, male, were good kids, but it was obvious Karen couldn't afford their education. So, being the nice people we are, Jake and I decided we'd help pay for the kids' schooling. It felt like the right thing to do. We didn't want Karen or the kids to feel like they had no options, and we had enough savings to cover tuition. Plus, it's family, you know? You help out when you can. At first, everything seemed fine. Karen was super grateful, and her kids were respectful, at least back then. Lily, the oldest, was always a star student. She graduated college, got a great job, and was making something of herself. She thanked us all the time for what we did, even though she probably could have figured it out on her own. But we were happy to help. Max and Lucas were younger, still in high school, and at the time, they seemed like good kids too. They were doing fine in school, and everything felt like it was working out. We were helping out, the kids were doing well, and Karen wasn't as stressed out. Win-win, right? Well, things started to go south the moment Max finished high school. That's when I started noticing a shift in how he acted. He graduated, and we asked him, like we did with Lily, what his plans were for college. Instead of being excited or even appreciative, Max hit us with, "I don't want to go to college, just give me the money instead." I remember Jake and I just staring at him, confused, like, what? College money isn't pocket change you can just spend on whatever. So, Jake asked him, "What do you want the money for?" Max casually said he wanted to start a business, like we should have known already. Now don't get me wrong, starting a business isn't a bad idea if you've got a plan. But Max didn't have one. He had no idea what kind of business he wanted to start. No clue about anything, really. He just said, "I'll figure it out," like that was enough for us to hand over thousands of dollars. Jake pressed him a bit more, asking, "Okay, what's the business idea?" All Max could say was, "Something online," that was it. No details, no strategy, no nothing, just something online. It felt like he thought we were stupid or something. We didn't say no right away, but we told him we needed time to think it over. Max just shrugged and said, "Cool," and left it at that. But that wasn't the end of it. A couple of weeks later, Max started following up with us, like it was our responsibility to give him this money. He was texting Jake all the time, asking if we'd made a decision. It felt like he was acting as if we owed him this money, which made 0 sense to me. Jake and I sat down, talked it over, and decided there was no way we were giving him the money for this half-baked idea. Max had no business experience, no plan, and honestly, no respect for the fact that we were even considering helping him. We didn't want to set him up to fail by throwing money at something that wasn't going to work. When Jake told him our decision, Max completely flipped out. And here's the kicker. He didn't throw a tantrum at us. Oh no, that would have been too easy. Instead, He ran to Karen and Linda, Jake's mom, and started complaining that we weren't supporting him. He made it sound like we were being unreasonable, like we'd promised him this money, and were now going back on our word. Then Karen got involved, and now we had the whole family breathing down our necks. Karen was telling us that we needed to support Max's dreams, and Linda was saying we weren't keeping our promise to help with the kids' education. Jake shut that down real fast, telling them both that we weren't giving Max the money because he had no plan. He made it clear we'd happily pay for Max's college tuition if he ever decided to go back to school, but we weren't funding some mystery business that didn't exist. Karen and Linda tried to guilt us into it, but we held firm. After a few rounds of back and forth, things went quiet for a while. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Karen mentioned something about selling some family heirlooms to give Max the money, which sounded like a terrible idea, but we stayed out of it. Whatever she wanted to do was her business. Then, surprise, surprise, Max's business never happened. All that talk, and it didn't go anywhere. No shock there. But here's where things get really awkward. After Max's business idea flopped, he came crawling back, acting like nothing happened. He told us he was ready to go to college now and asked if we'd cover his tuition. And you know what? We did. We're suckers, I guess. But something was off. Even though we were paying for his education, like we promised, Max's attitude toward us changed. He went from being friendly and talkative to giving us the cold shoulder. It was like, all of a sudden, we weren't good enough for him. He'd barely talk to us at family gatherings, and when he did, it was short, one-word answers. No thanks, no appreciation, just silence. That's when I realized that maybe this whole thing was a mistake. Helping Karen and her kids was supposed to be a good thing, but now it felt like we were dealing with a couple of entitled brats who didn't care about anything but the money, and that's just the start of where things went wrong. But I'll get to the rest later. So, after all that back and forth with Max's failed business idea, things were awkward, but we thought we'd move past it. He was back in college, and we were paying for his tuition, just like we said we would. But then Karen invited us to dinner for Lucas's 17th birthday. And let me tell you, that's when everything went downhill fast. Now, going into this dinner, I wasn't exactly thrilled. Things had been tense ever since Max pulled that stunt with the business, but Jake thought it would be a good idea for us to go and try to keep the peace. You know, family and all that. So I agreed, but I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was off. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. We got to Karen's house, and at first, everything seemed pretty normal. The kids were there, Karen was there, and Linda, Jake's mom, was there too. Of course. We sat down for dinner, and right away, I could tell something was different with Max. He'd always been kind of distant since the whole business blow-up, but this time he was barely talking to us. Just quick answers, no real conversation, and he wasn't making any eye contact. I tried to ignore it and focus on Lucas's birthday. It was his day, after all, and I didn't want to make it about the awkwardness between us and Max. But then, about halfway through the dinner, Lucas suddenly dropped a bomb on me. Out of nowhere, he looked straight at me and said, "How could Jake even find you attractive? You're so old and ugly." I froze. I literally didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you even say to something like that? I could feel the blood drain from my face, and I just sat there, staring at him, trying to process if I'd actually heard that right. It felt like time stopped for a second. Did this 17-year-old kid really just insult me like that at his own birthday dinner? Before I could even react, Jake was already on his feet. He snapped. He's usually pretty calm, but this time he was furious. He turned to Lucas and said, "What the hell did you just say?" The whole table went dead silent. And you know what the worst part was? Karen, Max, and Linda. They were all laughing, like Lucas had just made the funniest joke in the world. They didn't seem to care that I was sitting there, totally humiliated, trying to figure out what I did to deserve that kind of insult. Jake wasn't having any of it. He turned to Lucas and said, "Apologize right now." But Lucas just smirked and said, "What?" It was just a joke. That's when I lost it. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment and anger. It wasn't just a joke, and he knew it. They all knew it. I turned to Karen, hoping she'd step in and tell her son to knock it off, but instead she just shrugged and said, "Come on, it's his birthday. Don't ruin the night over something so small. He's just a kid." Just a kid? Are you kidding me? He's 17, not 7. He knew exactly what he was doing, and the fact that she was brushing it off like it was no big deal, I couldn't believe it. Jake was livid. He told Lucas again, "Apologize or we're leaving." Lucas just sat there, grinning, like he'd won something. And Karen? She just sat there too, like this was all totally fine. Linda, of course, chimed in with her usual, "People can have opinions," as if calling me ugly at a family dinner was some kind of valid criticism. That was it. Jake stood up, grabbed my hand, and said, "We're leaving. This conversation isn't going anywhere until you all apologize to her." As we were standing to leave, Linda grabbed my arm and tried to pull me back into my chair. "Come on, it's his birthday. Don't make a big deal out of this." "He didn't mean anything by it," she said, as if I was the one making things awkward. She actually had the nerve to tell me that I should know how to handle criticism from kids. I yanked my arm away from her and said, "He's not a kid. And even if he was, it's your job to teach him some manners." And here's the kicker. While all this was going on, I could see Lucas and Max sitting there, smirking, like this whole thing was some kind of game to them. They thought it was funny, like they'd accomplished exactly what they set out to do, make me feel like crap. I stared at them both and said, "It's not funny. You guys are mean, and one day you're going to pay for treating people like this." Then I walked out before anyone could say anything else. Jake followed right behind me, fuming. As we got in the car, I could feel the anger bubbling up inside of me. I was shaking, not because of what Lucas had said, but because of how everyone else acted like it wasn't a big deal, like it was my problem for being upset, like I was the one overreacting. We drove home in silence, but I could tell Jake was just as furious as I was. When we got home, we didn't even talk about it. We both just needed to cool down and process what had happened. But it didn't stop there. A week later, Karen and Linda showed up at our house unannounced, trying to apologize. I'll save the details of that disaster for later, but let's just say it was one of the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And you know what? Lucas never apologized. Not once. The whole thing was a wake-up call for me. I realized that no matter how much we helped Karen and her kids, no matter how much we gave, it didn't matter. They didn't respect us. They didn't care about us. And that was the moment I knew things were never going to be the same again. So after that whole disaster at Lucas's birthday dinner, Jake and I decided to keep our distance from Karen and the rest of them. Honestly, we were done. You can only take so much disrespect before you just stop caring. But of course, it didn't take long for them to come crawling back. And surprise, surprise, they didn't come back with any real apologies. No, they came back because they wanted something from us. It had been maybe a week since the dinner incident when I came home one afternoon to find Karen and Linda standing in our living room, arguing with Jake. I hadn't even made it all the way inside the house before I knew this was going to be bad. They were going at it, Karen trying to talk Jake into something, Linda standing there with that usual look on her face, like she was trying to play peacemaker, but also clearly on Karen's side. I walked in, acting like I didn't even see them, and went straight to our bedroom. I was done with all of it. I didn't want to hear whatever excuses or nonsense they were about to throw at us. And I definitely didn't want to listen to Karen's fake apologies. But of course, Karen couldn't just let it go. She followed me to the bedroom, knocking on the door like she was going to solve everything with a little chat. She came in with Linda, and they both started with the same tired lines. "We're so sorry about what happened. We talked to Lucas. He feels terrible about it, blah blah blah." I didn't believe a word of it. So I just said, "Okay, where is Lucas then? If he's so sorry, why isn't he here apologizing himself?" Karen stumbled over her words for a minute and finally said something like, "He's too embarrassed to face you, but we're here to apologize on his behalf." Yeah, right. Lucas wasn't embarrassed. He was too full of himself to care. They were only there because they needed money again, and it wasn't long before the real reason for their visit came out. After a few minutes of awkward fake apologies, Karen finally said, "Lucas is getting ready to graduate high school, and he wants to go to college. And, well, we're hoping you guys will help out with tuition, like you did with Lily." I just sat there, staring at them, wondering if they even realized what they were asking. After everything that had happened, after the way their kids had treated me, they were really standing there, asking for money like nothing had happened. No real apology, no accountability, just straight to asking for favors. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to say something, but he just stood there, arms crossed, fuming. So I finally said, "We're not paying for anything until Lucas apologizes. And not through you. He needs to come here and say it to my face. Until that happens, don't ask us for anything." Karen and Linda looked stunned, like they couldn't believe I'd said that. Karen immediately tried to backpedal, saying that Lucas shouldn't be punished for what he did, that he was just a kid and didn't deserve to miss out on college because of his brother's mistake. But here's the thing, Lucas wasn't exactly innocent either. Sure, he didn't call me ugly like Max did, but he'd been sitting there, laughing along with him. He didn't step in and say it was wrong, didn't stand up for me or Jake. He was just as bad, in my opinion. So I wasn't feeling too sorry for him at that moment. Jake finally chimed in, telling Karen and Linda, "Look, we've done a lot for you and your kids, but respect goes both ways. And we're not giving you a single cent until your sons grow up and learn some respect." You could tell that's not what they wanted to hear. Karen started to cry, like full-on tears, saying she didn't know what else to do, that she was struggling and needed our help. She even tried to say that we were being unfair, punishing the whole family over a small mistake. That's when I snapped. A small mistake? Calling me ugly and laughing about it isn't a small mistake. That's disrespectful and hurtful, and the fact that you're standing here trying to defend it makes it even worse. If you want our help, then your kids need to learn that actions have consequences. Linda stepped in at that point, trying to calm things down, saying that we shouldn't let this one incident ruin the relationship. She gave the whole "we're family" speech, telling us that we should forgive and move on because that's what family does. But honestly, I was over it. I was done being the bigger person, done being the one who always forgave and moved on, while they continued to take advantage of us. So I told them, no. Until your sons show some real remorse and respect, we're not paying for anything. You need to figure this out on your own. The conversation went in circles for a while longer, with Karen and Linda trying every angle to get us to change our minds. But Jake and I stood firm. We weren't going to let them guilt us into giving them money. We'd been more than generous with them for years, and this was the thanks we got. It wasn't happening anymore. Eventually, they left, Karen still crying and Linda looking pissed off. Jake and I sat there in silence for a while after they were gone, just trying to process what had just happened. It felt like we'd crossed some kind of line, like things would never go back to the way they were before, and honestly, I was okay with that. At that moment, I realized that we'd spent too long trying to make everyone else happy, trying to be the good family members, always there to help out, but none of that mattered if we weren't respected. Karen, Lucas, Max, they didn't appreciate anything we'd done for them. They just expected it. They acted like we owed them something, like they were entitled to our help. But that day, we made it clear. Respect is earned, not given. And we weren't going to support people who didn't show us any. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about making them happy. I was focused on what was right for us, and that felt pretty damn good. So, after Karen and Linda showed up at our place, begging for money and offering their half-hearted apologies, things went quiet for a bit. Jake and I were sticking to our guns. We weren't going to budge until we got a real apology from Lucas, and we weren't going to keep throwing money at people who couldn't show us basic respect. It felt good to stand firm, but I knew it was only a matter of time before we heard from them again. Fast forward a couple of months, and we got an email from Max. Not a call, not a visit, an email. And what did this email say? It was basically a demand for us to pay for Lucas's college tuition. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just a link to the tuition payment page, like we were some sort of ATM. I was honestly shocked at the audacity. After everything that happened, after the way we were treated, they really thought they could just email us and we'd hand over the money? No explanation, no, hey, sorry for the way things went down. Just a cold, businesslike email. Jake and I didn't even bother replying. We just let it sit there in our inbox, ignored. We figured if they wanted something from us, the least they could do was make the effort to talk to us like human beings. But then, 2 weeks later, Jake got a phone call from his mom, Linda. And of course, she was calling to tell him that Max had been waiting on the payment for Lucas's tuition and asked if maybe Jake had missed the email. Jake wasn't having any of it. He straight up told her. Max, who? I don't know him. Linda went silent for a second, probably trying to figure out if Jake was joking or serious. And then she started in with her usual crap. Oh, come on. You can't still be holding a grudge over something so small. Lucas didn't mean it. Your wife probably misunderstood what he said. Jake just sighed and said, Enough, Mom, we're done. We're cutting them off, and we're not paying for anything. If they can't respect us, then they're on their own. Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. Within minutes, Karen was blowing up Jake's phone, texting him apology after apology. She was clearly in panic mode, saying how she'd make the boys apologize and how they couldn't afford to lose our support. It was all pretty pathetic, honestly. If they were really sorry, they would have apologized a long time ago, without having to be threatened with losing our money. Jake didn't respond to any of her texts. He wasn't interested in half-hearted apologies that were only coming because they needed something from us. And I was completely on board with that. We'd been more than generous for years, and all we'd gotten in return was disrespect. The next day, I came home to find Karen and Linda standing outside our house, waiting for us. They didn't even bother calling ahead, just showed up like we were supposed to drop everything and deal with them. I could already feel my blood boiling before I even got out of the car. Jake and I walked up to the door, and before I could even put the key in the lock, Karen launched into this whole speech about how sorry they were and how they couldn't survive without our help. She was crying, of course, because that's her go-to move when she doesn't get what she wants. Jake didn't let her get far. He cut her off and said, We're not doing this. We don't welcome people who disrespect us into our home, and we're not going to support people who don't appreciate what we've done for them. You should have come to us with an apology a long time ago, not just because you need money now. Karen was desperate. She started pleading, saying that she and the boys were really sorry and just wanted another chance. But Jake wasn't buying it. He asked her, If the boys are so sorry, why aren't they here with you right now? Why didn't they come to apologize themselves? Karen froze for a second, and that's when Linda stepped in, trying to smooth things over like she always does. You know how kids are, she said. They're young and hormonal, and they don't always think about the consequences of their actions. But we, as adults, should know better. We shouldn't let this one mistake ruin their future. And that's when I lost it. I wasn't going to let her keep making excuses for those entitled brats. Calling me ugly and laughing about it isn't some teenage mistake, I told her. That's pure disrespect, and the fact that you're standing here defending them instead of holding them accountable just shows why they act the way they do. They've never had to face any real consequences for their behavior because you've always covered for them. I could see the look on Karen's face, and I knew she wasn't expecting me to come at her like that. But I wasn't done. I feel sorry for your boys, I told her, because they're going to have a hard time in life if they don't learn some basic respect. And that's on you, Karen. You've let them grow up thinking they can treat people however they want and still get whatever they ask for. That's not how the world works. The whole time, Linda just stood there, looking like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. Karen, on the other hand, was starting to get defensive, like she was about to argue back. But Jake stepped in before she could. We've given you plenty of chances, he said, but this is it. We're done. Don't ask us for anything else. Karen started crying again, trying to play the victim, but neither of us were falling for it. Jake just opened the door and said, "It's time for you to go." They left after that, and honestly, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For years, we'd bent over backward to help Karen and her kids, and for what? Nothing but entitlement and disrespect. I knew we'd made the right choice. We were being taken advantage of, and from that point on, we were cutting them off completely. No more money, no more help. They were on their own, and if that meant they had to struggle a little to learn some lessons, then so be it. After we told Karen and Linda to leave and made it clear that we were cutting them off, I thought we might finally get some peace. But that's not how things go with people like them, I guess. If you're thinking they left us alone after that, you'd be wrong. It didn't take long for them to come back around, trying different ways to guilt us into giving them what they wanted. This time, though, we didn't cave. We were done. So, a few weeks after the big confrontation at our house, Jake and I got invited to a family event. Jake's grandfather was turning 75, and the whole family was going to be there to celebrate. We weren't sure if we wanted to go. The idea of spending a day surrounded by Karen, Max, and Lucas didn't exactly thrill me, but Jake's grandpa had always been good to us, and we didn't want to miss his big day because of the drama. So we decided to go. When we got there, everything seemed fine at first. People were mingling, laughing, and catching up. Grandpa was in a good mood, and it looked like the day was going to go smoothly. We'd managed to avoid Karen and her boys so far, which was already a win in my book. But of course, that wasn't going to last. I should have known better. I was standing with Jake, talking to his cousin, when I noticed Lucas and Max watching me from across the room. They weren't even trying to hide it, just standing there, staring at me like I was some sort of joke. I ignored them at first, trying not to let it ruin my mood, but I could feel their eyes on me the entire time. Every time I glanced their way, they were whispering to each other, smirking, like they were up to something. Now, I'm not the type of person who lets things slide easily, but it was Grandpa's day, and I didn't want to cause a scene. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe they weren't even talking about me, and I was just being paranoid. But that feeling in my gut was telling me I wasn't wrong. Then, during the toast, Jake's dad was giving this heartfelt speech about family and how much Grandpa meant to all of us. I caught Lucas staring right at me, whispering something to Max. Max laughed, and I could see them both looking down at my dress, grinning like idiots. It was disgusting. These kids were half my age, and they were acting like creeps, checking me out, and making jokes like they were in some kind of middle school locker room. At that moment, I decided I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. Enough was enough. I'd been quiet too many times, let too many things slide, and I wasn't about to let them keep disrespecting me like that, especially not in front of Jake's entire family. So, after the toast, I walked straight over to them. They were still smirking and whispering when I got there, and as soon as they saw me coming, their faces changed. They clearly didn't expect me to confront them. "What's so funny?" I asked, crossing my arms and staring them down. They both looked at each other, then back at me, playing dumb, like they had no idea what I was talking about. "What? We weren't talking about you," Max said, trying to act all innocent. "Yeah, we were just joking around," Lucas added. But I could tell by the look on his face he was lying. I wasn't buying any of it. "You think I'm stupid? You've been staring at me all day, laughing and making comments. If you've got something to say it to my face." For a second, they both just stood there, frozen. Lucas looked like he was going to say something, but then Max, who I guess thought he was being clever, muttered under his breath, "What a derogatory name!" And they both started laughing. That's when I lost it. I stepped forward, getting right in Max's face, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it this time. "What did you just say?" I snapped. Max went pale, clearly not expecting me to call him out. He mumbled something about it being a joke, but I wasn't letting him off the hook. "You think it's funny to talk about people like that? You think it's okay to treat me this way after everything Jake and I have done for your family? This is how you repay us?" Lucas started to backpedal, apologizing, saying that they didn't mean anything by it. But it was too late. I wasn't interested in their half-hearted excuses. Jake must have noticed something was going on because before I knew it, he was standing next to me, asking what happened. I told him everything, right there in front of them, and Jake was livid. He turned to Max and Lucas and said, "If you don't apologize right now, you're both done. You'll never get anything from us again." But even then, Max just stood there, refusing to say sorry. Lucas, at least, had the decency to look ashamed and mutter some weak apology. But Max, he didn't care. He just stood there, arms crossed, daring us to do something about it. Jake shook his head and turned to walk away, and I followed, but not before making it clear to both of them. "You think you're untouchable? You're not. You're going to learn the hard way that people don't just take your crap forever." We left them standing there, looking dumbfounded, and I could feel the tension in the room. People had definitely noticed something was going on, but I didn't care anymore. I was done keeping up appearances for the sake of family. If they wanted to act like jerks, they were going to face the consequences. The rest of the day was awkward, to say the least. Karen gave me some weird looks, probably knowing something had gone down, but not daring to say anything. Linda avoided us all together, which was just fine by me. Jake and I spent most of the day keeping to ourselves, but we made sure to stay until the end for Grandpa's sake. We weren't going to let those kids ruin the day for him. As soon as we got home, I knew things were never going to be the same again. We'd drawn a line in the sand, and they'd crossed it. From that moment on, we were done with them for good this time. After that disaster of a family event, Jake and I knew we were done with Karen, Max, Lucas, and pretty much anyone who thought we'd just keep putting up with their crap. But of course, they didn't make it easy to cut ties. Karen and Linda kept trying to contact us, as if they could somehow undo all the disrespect with a few fake apologies. One day, about a week after the family event, I was at home, minding my own business, when my phone started blowing up with texts. First it was Linda, then Karen. They both sent long messages, practically begging us to let bygones be bygones and move past this. I didn't even have to read the whole thing to know what it was. More guilt trips, more attempts to make us feel bad for not being forgiving enough. I didn't respond. Neither did Jake. We weren't about to fall into that trap again. We'd already made our decision, and we weren't going to let them weasel their way back into our lives just because they needed something from us. Then, a couple of days later, Karen showed up at Jake's work. She didn't text, didn't call, just showed up, like that would somehow fix everything. She sat in the lobby for over an hour, waiting for Jake to come out and talk to her. But when Jake found out she was there, he didn't even bother going down. He told the receptionist to let her know he was busy and couldn't see her. Karen left after a while, probably realizing her guilt trip tactic wasn't going to work this time. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I got a message from Lily, Karen's oldest daughter. Now, Lily was always the one we actually liked. She was respectful, she worked hard, and she didn't seem to have that same entitled attitude that Max and Lucas had. She had moved away for work and was doing great, so we didn't expect to hear from her in the middle of all this drama. Her message was short, but straight to the point. She apologized for how her family had treated us and told me she completely understood why we'd cut them off. She even said she'd had her own issues with Karen and the boys lately, and that she wasn't surprised things had blown up like they had. Lily didn't try to guilt me, didn't ask for anything. She just said she hoped we were doing okay and wanted us to know that she was on our side. I'll be honest, that message meant a lot. It reminded me that not everyone in that family was a lost cause. Lily was proof that you could grow up in the same environment and still turn out to be a decent person. We responded to her, thanked her for her kind words, and let her know we appreciated her reaching out. It was a small moment of peace in all the chaos, and honestly, it made me feel better about the whole situation. It reminded me that Jake and I had made the right decision by cutting off the people who didn't deserve our kindness. And from that point on, we stayed firm. No contact, no more chances. We were finally free of their drama, and honestly, it felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders.